Take a look at this exhibit. On the up and down axis is the long-term potential for the use type. On the horizontal axis is the level of short-term COVID distress. What you want to invest in for opportunistic returns is something that is in distress now with still long-term potential for NOI. And we'll look at a few different sectors with it. Let's look at residential for rent first. So here we are in the upper, so here's the multifamily exhibit of this. So in the upper left quadrant, we have the safety zone, I'll call it. It's also known as the flight to quality area. So here you have types of investments with long-term strong fundamentals and low levels of current distress. Here you have the investments that might not have high risk-adjusted returns because people like them so much, as Adam said. It's like that old joke saying nobody goes there anymore, it's too crowded. If it's popular for safety reasons, there's no deep discounting to be had. In this corner, we have Class A apartments. People living in Class A apartments have more savings and disposable income, and they have their own safety net to tide them over a temporary loss of income. So again, not much distress. We also have in this quadrant, single family for rent. Single family for rent. If people find themselves less able to buy a home, that adds to demand for SFR, single family for rent. This is a solid segment of real estate, but it's hard to find distress here, other than one-off homes that might go into foreclosure. And there are a lot of companies salivating and ready to snap up those one-off foreclosure homes and turn them into SFR. And then those unfortunates who get foreclosed out of their homes will go and rent an SFR. So it's kind of a closed loop. Affordable and manufactured housing have a lot of demand, but there's also a lot of unemployment that affects those sectors. These are still in the safety quality quadrant though, because collections and occupancies are being supported by the fear of losing a below market rent. The tenants in the below market income qualified apartments don't want to get evicted once evictions are allowed again, so they're not rent striking. In the upper right quadrant now, that's the money box. That's where you're most likely to get great risk-adjusted returns. Just to pick one of these, senior housing. We see short-term disruption in senior housing for obvious reasons, but long-term, we think it's really a need-based use. It's not clear that the resistance being seen today for seniors to move out of their single-family home and into congregate living is permanent, and probably it's not. We expect this segment to come back. And again, this analysis, I just have to mention Adam Ducker. He has driven that research. You've also got Class B and Class C apartments here in this money quadrant. Long term, the demand is going to be very strong. You could see some operators get into a jam though in the second half of this year or next year, and there may be some interesting distress opportunities and deals. In the lower right quadrant, we have the high risk bets. So we have student housing. Student housing has held up surprisingly well so far. Good collection rates and 70% renewals for the upcoming academic year. But there's danger, so you want to get paid for that risk. Will long-term demand be reduced by the sort of remote learning trend? There was already kind of a movement towards online and remote learning. That was already happening, but it's going to pick up even more momentum now. Online learning has a place, but it won't ever replace actual attendance of universities. Students don't see as much value in online learning. There's also a culture around going to college for the experience of being out on your own and learning among your peers. Student housing is not going away, particularly around large institutional universities near metro areas. I was talking to an operator named Ari Rosenblum from V Management. He said that, look, exciting cities are key. Easy access to a city is going to be important as a component of value and viability. And the large institutional universities just add even more kind of concrete weight to that. And the student housing product will adapt. There will be more single occupant dwellings, such as efficiencies in one-bedroom units. Demand was already higher for these kinds of units, right? And the COVID-19 event will only accelerate that trend. The co-living segment is another high-risk bet. Any place that has 2 or 3 people in a room can have significant challenges. So let's go to the next grid. Here, I'm going to look at a variety of non-residential uses. I want to call your attention to retail. The retail sector as a whole is in that high-risk quadrant, the lower right. There's a lot of distress and a lot of uncertainty about the long term or the duration of the distress. Now I'm going to just go right to the next slide where we show a breakdown of retail. You'll notice that there's nothing on the left-hand side. That's because all the types of retail have short-term distress. All that leaves is which types are in the opportunistic box on the top and which ones are in the high-risk parts of the high-risk category. The high-risk bets are any kind of mall and power centers and big box. We all know the story of Amazon and the whole online movement, plus what we've gone through with COVID. And now let's take a look at the same framework for office. First of all, a blanket statement: healthy building technologies will be extremely important across all types of offices. Life sciences, medical office. Medical offices were closed and now they're reopening. In the long run, we've been saying this whole time, demand will continue to grow and support this use. And we expect limited repricing in these kinds of properties. Creative office, there is a lot of interruption of NOI going on right now, but in the long term, the fundamentals are strong. We believe in that type of use. Co-working. There are obviously concerns about health and the implications of sharing, but the flexibility of this product type, that you're able to scale up and down, makes a lot of sense to us at RCLCO in the sense of, in a period of uncertain growth, you want to have that flexibility. The market will continue to demand short-term leases, so we think co-working is here to stay in the long run. Class B office is risky because if there's a decrease in overall office demand, which some are predicting, Class B might be a net loser. The risk there with Class B is, these are older buildings, structural obsolescence. Now let's talk about the work from home trend. We can't talk about office without talking about that. There'll be a lot more workers who work from home, for sure. But there will be fewer people in the office at a given time, and we might see the reversal of the long-term trend of office worker density. Remember, 30 years ago, the average office building had 250 square feet per employee, and it gradually trended down to 150. Now, if employees have to sit 6 feet apart from each other going forward, and fewer shared desks and shared cubicles, the amount of space per employee will have to trend back up again. Any way you slice it, work from home is going to be, going forward, a permanent part of many organizations. But surveys say that a lot of people want to come back to the office. Millennials are saying that there are too many distractions at home. Probably mainly the ones with kids, and I identify with that. I've got a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old at home. It does make it a challenge. Thinking about suburban office, will e-commuting and decentralization boost suburban office? It could. It could. It's a rational bet, but it does have some risk associated with it, and you'll want to get paid well for the risk associated with this type of building. There's a lot of talk about de-densification, and we think it's going to happen, but not necessarily in a dramatic way, the way some people are thinking and writing about. Todd LaRue, one of our managing directors, talked about it on our Myths webinar from a week or two ago, and he applied it to residential. It's all relative, right? Moving from an apartment to a townhouse is a decrease in density. People may move one tier out, farther out from the urban core, and we do see the ongoing urbanization of suburban locations, and that may accelerate. So we really see it at RCLCO as an acceleration of a trend that was already going on. Now let's shift to industrial. During the last 30 years, the trend was towards just-in-time inventory. Well, now it's going to change a bit. There'll be a need for more inventory at any given time, and maybe some just-in-case inventory. A comment about manufacturing, though. Onshoring of manufacturing will occur, but Ben Maslin says this will be limited. The US is not a competitive location for most manufacturing with labor costs and regulations. So maybe Mexico will gain a lot of manufacturing. Relatively little coming to the United States. Thinking about warehousing, refrigerated warehousing for grocery delivery is going to be a winner. But of course, there's the opposite of distress in that category right now. Same for warehousing related to online retail like Amazon. So it's a little bit harder to find distressed deals in that case.